In this topic, we'll learn about Introduction to using DNS Server on Windows Server 2012. Introduction. Domain Name System DNS as a system that translates a domain name to the IP address that is associated with it or the World Wide Web. Once the DNS server rule is installed, it needs to be configured for your domain. When install a Windows Server, DNS uses a database stored in Active Directory or in a file and contains list of domain names and corresponding IP addresses. When a client requests a website by typing a domain URL inside the web browser, the very first thing the browser does is to resolve the domain to an IP address. To resolve the IP address, the browser checks into various places. At first, it checks the local cache of the computer. If there is no entry for the domain in question, it then checks the local host file, for example C, Windows, System32, driver, etc. hosts. And if no record is found there, either it finally queries the DNS server. The DNS server returns the IP address to the client and the browser forms the HTTP request which is sent to the destination web server. The above series of events describes a typical HTTP request to a site on the internet. The same series of events are usually followed when requesting access to resources within the local network and Active Directory, with the only difference that the local DNS server is aware of all internet hosts and domains. A DNS server can be configured in any server running Windows Server 2012 operating system. The DNS server can be Active Directory integrated or not. A few important tasks a DNS server in Windows Server 2012 is used for are: resolve host names to their corresponding IP address DNS. Resolve IP address to their corresponding hostname, reverse DNS. Locate global catalog servers and domain controllers. Locate mail servers. Now, DNS zones and records. A DNS server contains forward lookup zone and reverse lookup zone. Each zone contains different types of resource records. A forward lookup zone maps hostname to an IP address, while reverse lookup zone maps the IP address of the hostname. The DNS zone is stored in a file or an Active Directory database. Only one copy of zone is writable and others are read-only if the zone is stored in Active Directory database. First, install DNS server and then go to Start button and then click on Server Manager and then click on DNS. Right click your server, select DNS Manager. Click the Action tab and then select Configure a DNS server. The Configure DNS server wizard will come up. Click Next to continue. Now, create a forward lookup zone. A forward lookup zone is a DNS function that takes a domain name and resolves it to an IP address. Create forward and reverse lookup zones. A reverse lookup zone is a DNS function that takes an IP address and resolves it to a domain name. Configure root hands only. Root hands only will have the IP addresses of DNS servers where records can be acquired. Click on Next. Select where the DNS data will be maintained for your network resources and then click Next. Enter your new zone name, in this case your domain, and click Next. For example, worldofitech.com, and then click on Next. Next, you select how your server will respond to dynamic updates. And then click on Next. Select whether your DNS server should forward queries or not. If you choose yes, type the IP of the server and click Next. If no, select no, it should not forward queries and click Next. Click on Next. Click Finish. Now create zones. Forward lookup zones. Right click, new zone, click on Next. Select the type of zones you want to create. Click on Next. Select how you want to zone data replicated. Click on Next. Zone name World of iTech, and then click on Next. Dynamic updates, do not allow dynamic updates, and then click on Next and click on Finish. Now click on Reverse Lookup Zone. Right click on Reverse Lookup Zone, click on New Zone, and then click on Next. Now select the type of zone you want to create. Click on Next. Select how you want to zone data replicated. Click on Next. Choose whether you want to create a reverse lookup zone for IP version 4 addresses or IP version 6 addresses. Click on Next. To identify the reverse lookup zone, type the network ID or the name of the zone. Type, for example, 192.168.0, and then click on Next. Dynamic updates, do not allow dynamic updates, and then click on Next and click on Finish.